The classroom buzzed with the usual first-day energy as students filed into advanced xenobiology. Maya Chen slipped into a seat near the back, her worn backpack hitting the floor with a soft thud. She kept her head down, brown hair falling across her face like a curtain. Around her, students from dozens of worlds chatted excitedly, their scales, fur, and exotic features marking them as children of the Galactic Union's elite families. Maya was different. She wore simple clothes, nothing like the expensive synthetic fabrics that shimmered on her classmates. Her notebook was paper, actual paper, not a holographic display. When others spoke of their summer travels to crystalline moons or gas giant resorts, she stayed quiet. She had spent her summer working at a recycling facility on Earth's lower districts, saving every credit for tuition. The teacher entered, Professor Velkesh, a Therian with deep purple skin and 4 graceful arms. His reputation preceded him as one of the most brilliant minds in xenobiology, but also one of the strictest. He had taught at the Galactic Academy for 70 years, shaping the minds of ambassadors, scientists, and leaders. "Welcome," he began, his voice carrying easily through the room. "This course will challenge everything you think you know about life in the universe. Many of you come from prestigious families. Many of you have connections that open doors." His eyes swept the room. "None of that matters here. Only your mind matters." He pulled up a holographic roster, names floating in the air. "When I call your name, stand and tell us your homeworld and why you're here." One by one, students rose. There was Crixnell from the warrior clans of Drexus, his exoskeleton gleaming. His family had produced generals for 12 generations. Lysa from the singing colonies of Melodious Prime, her crystalline form refracting light into rainbows. Her mother was the chief science officer of the Third Fleet. On and on it went, each name carrying weight, history, power. Maya sank lower in her seat. She knew what was coming. She had spent her whole life trying to avoid this moment. Professor Velkesh continued down the list, his expression unchanging as each student presented their impressive lineage. Then his eyes found a name, and for the first time he paused. His 4 hands stilled. The holographic display flickered slightly. "Maya Chen," he said slowly, pronouncing each syllable with unusual care. The room went silent. Students who had been whispering stopped. Even Crixnell, who had been cleaning his mandibles, looked up. Maya felt her heart hammering. She wanted to stay seated, to pretend she hadn't heard. But Professor Velkesh was staring directly at her, and his expression had changed completely. Where before there had been professional detachment, now there was something else. Recognition, and something that looked almost like fear. "Stand up," he said softly. It wasn't a command. It was a request. Maya slowly got to her feet, her chair scraping against the floor sounding impossibly loud in the sudden quiet. Professor Velkesh's voice was steady, but everyone could hear the undercurrent of something profound. "Tell me, are you related to Admiral Sarah Chen?" Maya's jaw tightened. "She was my grandmother." A ripple went through the classroom. Several students gasped. The Therian student in the front row actually stood up to get a better look at her. "And Commander Marcus Chen." Professor Velkesh continued. "My grandfather," Maya whispered. Now the whispers were urgent, excited. Maya caught fragments of conversation. "The Battle of Proxima. Single-handedly held the line. Impossible odds." Professor Velkesh held up a hand for silence. "Dr. Elizabeth Chen?" "My mother." Maya's voice was barely audible. "And your father?" Maya's eyes met his. "Captain James Chen, he died at the frontier." The room erupted. Students were talking over each other, pulling up historical records on their displays. Maya saw her family name flashing across screens attached to battles, discoveries, treaties. The Chen family wasn't just known. They were legendary, but Professor Velkesh wasn't finished. He manipulated the holographic display, bringing up something that made his hands shake slightly. "And what is your full name, student?" Maya wanted to disappear. She had spent years using only her first name and surname, keeping the middle name off official documents whenever possible, hoping no one would connect the dots. But academy enrollment required full legal names. "Maya Sentinel Chen," she said, and the classroom exploded into chaos. Sentinel, the name carried by every firstborn Chen for 8 generations, the name that appeared in history books, on monuments, in songs sung across 100 worlds. The name that meant protector, guardian, defender of humanity when the rest of the galaxy had written them off as primitive and weak. Students were on their feet now. A Xinthian student bowed deeply, his tentacles touching the floor in a gesture of profound respect. Others were staring with open mouths. The girl who had been sitting next to Maya had moved her chair away slightly, as if proximity to a sentinel was overwhelming. Crixenal, the warrior who had seemed so proud of his military lineage minutes ago, was looking at Maya with something like awe. His people valued strength above all, and the Chen family had demonstrated strength when humanity had nothing else. Professor Velkesh finally restored order, but his demeanor had completely changed. "Miss Chen, please sit." He turned to address the class. "This is a perfect example of why assumptions are dangerous. While you were all concerned with appearances and reputation, a genuine hero was sitting among you, unnoticed." Maya wanted to argue, to tell them she wasn't a hero, that she had done nothing to earn the weight of her name. But she knew it wouldn't matter. The Chen family legacy wasn't just about what they had done, it was about what they represented. Humans had entered the Galactic Union as the newest, weakest species. They had no advanced technology, no powerful weapons, no natural advantages. They were soft, short-lived, and fragile. And yet, when war came to the frontier worlds, when the Void Swarm emerged from dark space threatening all civilization, it was the humans who held the line. Not because they were stronger or smarter, but because they refused to give up. The Chen family had led that stand, and Maya's grandmother had earned the title that changed everything: Sentinel. Professor Velkesh continued the lesson, but everything had changed. Students kept glancing at Maya, their expressions mixing curiosity, respect, and uncertainty. She had become something else in their eyes, no longer the quiet girl in the back, but a living connection to events that shaped the modern galaxy. As class ended and students filed out, many approached her. Some wanted to ask questions, others simply wanted to be near her, as if her family's courage was contagious. Maya answered politely, but inside she felt the familiar weight settling onto her shoulders. She had come to the academy hoping to be seen for herself, not as another Chen, but the name followed her like a shadow, and now everyone knew exactly who she was supposed to be. The days following the revelation were uncomfortable. Maya found herself at the center of attention wherever she went. Students pointed and whispered in the corridors. Professors looked at her with expectation heavy in their eyes. The cafeteria would quiet slightly when she entered, as if her presence demanded a certain reverence she had never asked for. She tried to maintain her routine. Wake early, attend lectures, study in the library's quietest corners, avoid crowds. But the academy was a small world and news traveled fast. By the end of the first week, even the administrative staff knew who she was. The woman who processed her meal credits had called her Miss Sentinel, with a smile that suggested Maya should be pleased. In advanced xenobiology, the dynamic had shifted completely. Students who had never spoken to her now wanted to partner for lab work. Crixenal, the Drexian warrior, had appointed himself as her unofficial bodyguard, walking 3 steps behind her between classes. She hadn't asked for this. She didn't want it. But refusing seemed to hurt his feelings, and she was too tired to fight about it. Professor Velkesh assigned their first major project: analyze an unknown biological sample and determine its origin world, its evolutionary advantages and potential applications. Students would work in pairs, and Maya hoped she might finally get to demonstrate her actual knowledge rather than coast on her family name. She was examining the sample distribution list when a shadow fell across her desk. Looking up, she found herself facing Zara Cathex, a Xenarian student whose people were known for their intellectual superiority. The Xenarians had mastered quantum physics while humans were still discovering fire. They had built city ships that traversed galaxies before Earth had cities at all. "Maya Chen," Zara said, her voice carrying the musical quality common to her species. "I would like to work with you." Maya blinked. Zara had spent the previous week working alone, pointedly ignoring all requests for partnership. She was brilliant, everyone knew it, and she clearly believed collaboration would slow her down. "Why?" Maya asked directly. Zara's expression shifted, something like amusement flickering across her crystalline features. "Because you interest me. Your family defeated impossible odds with primitive resources. I want to understand how." At least she was honest. Maya appreciated that more than false friendship. All right, but I do my share of the work. I would expect nothing less from a sentinel. Their sample arrived in a sealed containment unit, a small fragment of organic material that pulsed with a faint bioluminescence. The challenge was that it had been deliberately altered to remove obvious identifiers. No database would help. They would need to rely purely on analysis and deduction. Maya immediately began running basic tests: cellular structure, chemical composition, energy conversion methods. Zara watched for a moment, then started her own analysis using more advanced Zenarian equipment she had brought from home. 2 hours passed in focused silence. Maya documented everything carefully, building a profile piece by piece. The sample had unusual characteristics. It could survive in both oxygen and methane atmospheres. Its cells could reorganize based on environmental pressure, and it produced energy through a method she had never encountered before. Impossible, Zara muttered, staring at her results. This cellular structure shouldn't be stable. The energy requirements would tear it apart. Maya looked up from her microscope. Unless it's not trying to maintain stability. What if the instability is the point? Zara turned to her, eyes narrowing. Explain. Look at how the cells reorganize. Maya pulled up her recordings showing the sample's behavior over time. They're not trying to maintain a fixed form. They're constantly adapting, accepting the instability as a feature rather than a flaw. She paused, thinking. Like water. It takes the shape of its container, but it's still water. Zara was silent for a long moment, processing. Then she moved to her console and began running new calculations. If you're correct, this would indicate the species evolved in an environment with extreme variability, somewhere with constantly changing conditions. A tidally locked world, Maya suggested, one side burning, one side frozen, with a narrow habitable band that shifts with orbital variations. They worked through the night, testing the hypothesis. Maya found herself falling into a rhythm with Zara, their different approaches complementing each other. Where Zara had superior computational tools, Maya had intuition developed from years of studying Earth's own adaptive species. Where Zara saw mathematical elegance, Maya saw evolutionary pressure and survival. By dawn, they had their answer. The sample came from a species native to Vexcar, a world with an extremely elliptical orbit that created seasonal extremes lasting decades. Life there had evolved to be fundamentally adaptive, capable of surviving conditions that would kill most galactic species. Professor Velkesh reviewed their findings in class the next day. He read through their report silently, his 4 hands moving across the holographic display. The classroom was quiet, students waiting for his verdict. This is exceptional work, he finally said. Not only have you correctly identified the origin, but you've done so through pure analytical reasoning rather than database searches. You've demonstrated true understanding of xenobiological principles. He looked at Maya. Tell me, Miss Chen, how did you develop the insight about stability and instability? Maya hesitated. She knew what he wanted to hear. Something about her family's legacy, about human adaptability in the face of impossible odds. But she was tired of being defined by what others had done. I grew up on Earth's lower districts, she said. We had power failures constantly. Water pressure dropped without warning. Temperature controls broke down. You learned to adapt or you suffered. When I saw the sample's behavior, it reminded me of home. Not the glorious human resistance everyone talks about, but ordinary people dealing with systems that didn't work properly. Several students laughed, but not mockingly. They understood. Zara was nodding slowly, a new expression on her face that might have been respect. Professor Velkesh smiled, a rare sight. And there is the true human advantage. Not some mystical warrior spirit, but practical experience with adversity. Well done, both of you. As class ended, students approached Maya again, but the dynamic had shifted. They weren't seeking proximity to a legend anymore. They had seen her work, seen her think, seen her contribute something that wasn't inherited. She was becoming real to them, a person rather than a symbol. Zara gathered her equipment slowly, clearly thinking about something. Finally, she spoke. I misjudged humans. I thought your species' success was luck. Primitive creatures stumbling into victory through ignorance of how outmatched they were. Maya raised an eyebrow. And now? Now I think perhaps ignorance was your weapon. You didn't know you were supposed to lose, so you didn't. Zara paused. That is more frightening than any physical advantage. An enemy who doesn't accept the mathematics of defeat is the most dangerous kind. We're not enemies, Maya said quietly. No, Zara agreed. We are not. But your grandmother understood what I am only now learning. The Void Swarm had every advantage. Superior numbers, superior technology, superior strategy. They should have won. But humans looked at those impossible odds and said, so what? That is terrifying, Maya Chen. Your people are terrifying. Maya thought about her grandmother, who she had only known through stories. Sarah Chen had been a logistics officer, not a warrior. She had held the supply lines open through 3 months of constant siege, keeping food, ammunition, and medicine flowing to the front lines when every calculation said it was impossible. She had worked 20-hour days, sleeping in her office, eating ration bars, refusing to let the mathematics of defeat become reality. My grandmother was scared every day of that siege, Maya said. She told my mother that before she died. She was terrified, exhausted, and sure she would fail. But she kept working because people were depending on her. That's not terrifying. That's just being human. Zara considered this. Perhaps that is what makes it terrifying. That you do impossible things while being afraid. That you succeed while feeling you will fail. That you continue when logic demands surrender. She picked up her bag. I would like to work with you again, Maya. Not because of your name, but because you see problems differently than I do. Together we might accomplish something neither of us could alone. Maya smiled, feeling something loosen in her chest. For the first time since arriving at the academy, someone was seeing her as herself. I'd like that too. As they left the classroom, Crixnell fell into step behind them. Maya turned to him. You know you don't have to follow me everywhere, right? The Drexian warrior clicked his mandibles, a sound that might have been laughter. I know, but my people honor strength, and your family demonstrated strength when it mattered most. Besides, someone tried to sit in your usual seat this morning. I encouraged them to find elsewhere. Maya couldn't help but laugh. Maybe having a Drexian warrior as an accidental bodyguard wasn't the worst thing. At least he was honest about it. The Academy's central library was a marvel of engineering, a sphere of transparent aluminum that floated above the main campus, accessible only by gravity lifts. Inside, knowledge from 10,000 worlds filled both physical and digital archives. Maya had made it her refuge, a place where names mattered less than ideas. She was deep in research on adaptive cellular structures when alarms began blaring throughout the station. Red emergency lights painted the library's usually serene atmosphere in harsh colors. Students looked up from their studies, confusion turning quickly to concern. An announcement crackled through the speakers. All students report to designated safe zones immediately. This is not a drill. Faculty, initiate lockdown protocols. Maya grabbed her tablet and joined the stream of students heading for the exits. Crixnell appeared at her side, his warrior instincts making him more alert than afraid. Zara caught up moments later, her crystalline features reflecting the red emergency lights in unsettling patterns. What's happening? Zara asked, her usual calm replaced by urgency. Unknown, Crixnell responded, his sensory organs extended fully. But I smell fear. Many species, many scents. Something has them truly frightened. They reached their designated safe zone, a reinforced section of the lower campus designed to withstand almost any attack. Hundreds of students were already there, faculty members trying to maintain order while clearly struggling with their own anxiety. Professor Velkesh stood on a raised platform, his forearms raised for attention. The crowd slowly quieted. I will not lie to you, he began, his voice steady despite the circumstances. We have received a distress signal from the mining colony on Theta 7. A Void Swarm scout ship has been detected in the sector. The safe zone erupted in panic. Students from species who remembered the Void Swarm wars began crying out. Others pulled up historical records, reading accounts of the devastation the swarm had caused before being driven back into dark space 30 years ago. The Void Swarm was the galaxy's nightmare. They were not conquerors seeking territory or resources. They were consumers, breaking down all organic matter into base components to fuel their incomprehensible expansion. Worlds they touched became sterile rocks. Billions had died before the swarm was finally contained. Maya felt her blood turn cold. Her grandmother's stories suddenly felt very immediate. Sarah Chen had fought these things, had watched friends and colleagues dissolved by swarm weapons, had held the line knowing that every minute bought time for evacuations. The Galactic Fleet has been notified, Professor Velkesh continued. but they are 3 days away. The mining colony has 6,000 inhabitants. We are the closest station with defensive capabilities. Defensive capabilities? A Melodian student's voice rang out. We're a school. We're not equipped for military engagement. Professor Velkesh's expression hardened. The academy was built on the ruins of an old military installation. We have shield generators, point defense systems, and a small armory left over from the frontier wars. It was meant as historical preservation, but the systems are functional. A Therian professor stepped forward, her voice shaking. You're not suggesting we fight? We're educators, not soldiers, and these are children. These are students of the Galactic Academy, Velkesh corrected firmly. Many of you come from military families. All of you have been trained in emergency protocols, and we have something they need. He gestured to a holographic display showing the mining colony. Theta 7 has basic shelters, but nothing that can withstand a sustained swarm attack. If we activate our shields and open our docking bays, we can evacuate the colonists here. The Academy's shields can hold long enough for the fleet to arrive. And if they can't, someone asked. Silence fell. Everyone knew the answer. If the shields failed before the fleet arrived, they would all die. The swarm showed no mercy because it didn't understand the concept. It simply consumed. Maya found herself standing without meaning to. Heads turned toward her. She could feel the weight of attention, but this time it felt different. People weren't looking at her because of her name. They were looking at her because of what that name represented. Hope in impossible situations. We do it, Maya said, her voice carrying across the silent safe zone. We evacuate the colonists. Easy for you to say, a voice called out. Maya recognized him as Torvan, a student from the peaceful Luminari species. Your family died for these heroic gestures. Some of us would rather live. The word stung, but Maya understood the fear behind them. My father didn't die being heroic. He died doing his job. He was an evacuation coordinator, and he stayed on a failing station to make sure the last transport got away safely. He could have left. He chose to stay because it was the right thing to do. She looked around the room, meeting eyes, seeing the fear she felt reflected back at her. I'm scared too. I don't want to die. But there are 6,000 people on that colony who will definitely die if we do nothing. We have a chance to save them. Isn't that what the Galactic Union is supposed to be about? Protecting each other? Zara stood beside her. The mathematics are poor, but Maya is correct. If we have the capability to help and choose not to, we validate every claim that the Union is just an alliance of convenience, abandoned when actual sacrifice is required. Crixnal's mandibles clicked loudly. My people have a saying, a warrior who fears death dies 1,000 times. A warrior who accepts death dies only once and lives forever in song. This void swarm killed my great-uncle in the Proxima campaign. I will not run from them. More students stood. Slowly at first, then in growing numbers. Species that had fought alongside each other during the Void Swarm Wars, and species too young to remember all rising together. Professor Velkesh watched, and Maya saw something like pride cross his features. Then we evacuate. Faculty begin preparing the docking bays. Students with engineering backgrounds report to the shield control stations. Students with medical training prepare the infirmary. Everyone else, you'll help organize the colonists when they arrive. The safe zone transformed into organized chaos as people moved to their assignments. Maya found herself swept along, assigned to a coordination team that would manage the evacuation logistics. The next hours were a blur of activity. The Academy's ancient systems came online, shields flickering to life around the station. Docking bays opened like flower petals, ready to receive the desperate transport ships from Theta 7. Faculty members who hadn't touched military equipment in decades relearned forgotten skills. Maya worked at a console, tracking incoming ships and assigning docking locations. Beside her, a young Therian student named Keshal managed supply allocations. They developed a rhythm, calling out information to each other, making rapid decisions that would determine how efficiently they could get people to safety. First wave incoming, Keshal announced. 15 transports estimated 400 people. Direct them to bays 1 through 5, Maya responded. Medical teams standing by at each location. The transports arrived in ragged formation, clearly pushed beyond safe operating limits. Maya could see on her scans that some had taken damage, probably from debris as they rushed to escape the colony. But they were here, and they were full of people who desperately needed safety. As colonists poured into the academy, Maya coordinated with teams throughout the station. Food supplies were distributed. Living spaces were assigned. Children were separated from the chaos and taken to quiet areas where academy students tried to calm their fears with games and stories. Professor Velkesh appeared at her console. "You're doing well, Miss Chen. Your grandmother would be proud." Maya didn't look up from her work. "My grandmother would say we're not done yet. How many transports are still at Theta 7? 32. And our sensors have detected the Void Swarm scout ship changing course. It's heading this way." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. The scout ship wouldn't attack immediately. The swarm was efficient. It would observe, analyze, and call for reinforcements before engaging. That was simultaneously their blessing and their curse. They had time to evacuate everyone. But once the swarm arrived in force, there would be no escape. "How long until all transports are here?" Maya asked. 6 hours for the last one." "And how long until the swarm arrives?" Professor Velkesh's expression was grim. 8 hours. Maybe 9 if we're lucky. 2 hours. They would have 2 hours after the last colonist arrived before the swarm reached them. 2 hours to hold shields against a force that had devastated worlds. 2 hours before the fleet could arrive to save them, or 2 hours to die trying. Maya pulled up communication channels to every team on the station. "This is Maya Chen at Evacuation Coordination. The Swarm Scout has detected us and changed course. We have approximately 9 hours before engagement. That means we evacuate everyone, no exceptions, no delays. We don't leave anyone behind." Responses came back quickly. Acknowledgements, confirmations, and underneath it all fear, but also determination. The students of the Galactic Academy, children of a dozen species who had faced the swarm before, were refusing to run. Keshaw looked at her, his young face uncertain. "Do you really think we can do this?" Maya thought about her grandmother, holding supply lines through impossible odds. She thought about her father, staying behind so others could live. She thought about the legacy that had defined her entire life, and suddenly understood what it really meant. It wasn't about glory or heroism. It was about doing what needed to be done, even when you were terrified, even when success seemed impossible. "I think we're going to try," she said, "and sometimes that's enough." Maya watched the swarm craft encircle the academy like vultures preparing to feed. Her mind raced, searching for solutions where none seemed to exist. They had concentrated their shields to create one strong defense, but now that strength was also their weakness. The swarm had adapted as it always did. "Can we redistribute the shields?" she asked desperately. "Not fast enough," Zara replied, her usual calm fractured by stress. "By the time we reconfigure, they'll have already breached the hull." Professor Velkesh stood frozen at his command station, 4 hands hovering over controls he couldn't bring himself to activate. Maya realized with sudden clarity that he was preparing to surrender, to open communications with the swarm and beg for mercy. But the swarm didn't understand mercy. They only understood consumption. "Wait," Maya said, an idea forming. "We can't spread the shields, but we can move them." Everyone turned to look at her. She pulled up the shield configuration, her hands moving fast across the holographic interface. "The generators can't protect the whole station at once, but they can be redirected in sequence. We rotate the shield facing at high speed, creating a rotating barrier, like a shield that spins around the station." "That's impossible," a Therian engineer protested. "The generators would need to shut down and restart constantly. The power fluctuations alone would tear the system apart." "Not if we use pulsed activation," Zara said, suddenly understanding. She moved to her console, fingers flying. "We don't keep the shields constantly active. We pulse them on and off in rapid sequence, each pulse covering a different facing. The swarm weapons need sustained contact to breach. If we're only exposed for fractions of a second at a time, distributed across multiple facings, they can't maintain the coherent beam necessary to penetrate." Professor Velkesh looked between them, hope fighting with doubt on his face. "This has never been attempted. The timing would need to be perfect. One miscalculation and we'd be completely exposed." "Then we'd better not miscalculate," Maya said. She met his eyes, channeling every ounce of her grandmother's legendary determination. "We didn't evacuate 6,000 people just to give up now. Give us a chance." Velkesh took a breath, then nodded. "Do it. Configure the rotating shield pulse." Maya and Zara worked together, their different approaches finding harmony in desperation. Maya handled the timing sequences. using her instinct for adaptation to anticipate how the swarm would react. Zara managed the power distribution, her Zenarian mathematical precision ensuring the generators wouldn't overload. 30 seconds until they're in attack position. Keshal warned. Almost there, Zara muttered, her crystalline hands dancing across controls. 20 seconds. Maya finalized the timing sequence. It was rough, untested, relying on assumptions about swarm weapon behavior drawn from historical records that were 30 years old. But it was all they had, 10 seconds. Activating now, Zara announced. The shield generators howled as they reconfigured. Instead of a single solid wall, the Academy's protective barrier began pulsing in rapid sequence, appearing and disappearing around different sections of the station so fast it created the illusion of complete coverage. On the displays, it looked like a flickering bubble of light, stuttering in and out of existence. The swarm craft attacked. Beams of dark energy lanced out from dozens of positions, converging on the Academy. But when they struck, the shields pulsed on for fractions of a second, deflecting the attacks before disappearing again. The swarm weapons couldn't maintain the sustained contact they needed to penetrate. Maya watched the power readings spike and fall in rapid rhythm. The generators were screaming, pushed beyond their design specifications, but they were holding. The pulsing shield rotation was working, but the swarm was adapting. The craft began timing their attacks, trying to fire in the brief moments when a section's shield pulse was off. They were learning the pattern, and they were fast. Within minutes, several beams got through, scorching the Academy's hull. They're synchronizing, Zara said tightly. They'll break through in 2 minutes, maybe less. Maya stared at the patterns, watching the swarm craft adjust their timing. They were so precise, so coordinated. That was their strength, but also their vulnerability. They operated as a network, sharing information instantaneously, acting as one mind. If they all learned the pattern, they would all attack at once and the shields would fail. Unless they couldn't learn the pattern. Randomize it, Maya said suddenly. Stop using a fixed sequence. Make it random. That's insane, the Therian engineer protested. The power distribution would be chaos. We'd have no idea which sections were protected at any given moment. Neither would they, Maya countered. They're trying to learn our pattern. If there is no pattern, they can't predict our vulnerable moments. Zara was already implementing the change, converting the fixed rotation to a randomized sequence. This will increase the risk of generator overload by 40%. But Maya is correct. It's our best option. The shield pulses became erratic, appearing in unpredictable locations with no discernible pattern. The swarmcraft fired again, and this time their careful timing was useless. They hit shields as often as not. Their precision turned against them. But the Academy's generators were paying the price. Warning alarms blared as power levels fluctuated wildly. Smoke began pouring from one of the generator rooms, and a team of students rushed to contain the damage. Generator 3 is offline, someone reported, compensating with the others, but we've lost 20% of our total capacity. They were dying by inches, trading their defensive systems for minutes of survival. Maya checked the chronometer. 38 more minutes until the fleet arrived. They had held for 19 minutes. They were past the halfway point. But could they last? The swarm scout ship, still hanging back while its smaller craft attacked, suddenly moved. It was coming in, apparently deciding that the smaller craft weren't enough. If that ship opened fire at full power, even their randomized pulsing shields wouldn't be enough. Crixnell raised his rifle, a gesture so futile it was almost funny. What could one warrior with a plasma rifle do against a ship that had destroyed worlds? But Maya saw something in that gesture. Defiance. The refusal to accept defeat even when defeat was certain. That was the human trait that had defined her family, that had earned her grandmother the title of Sentinel. Not superior weapons or tactics, but the simple stubborn refusal to give up. Target the scout ship, she said. Everyone looked at her like she'd lost her mind. With what? Professor Velkesh asked. We have point defense systems meant for asteroids, not capital ship weapons. Anything. Everything. Every weapon on this station. Fire at that scout ship. It won't penetrate their armor, the weapons officer protested. I don't care. Fire anyway. There was a moment of hesitation, then Velkesh nodded. Do as she says. All weapons target the scout ship. The Academy's ancient defensive weapons came to life. Point defense lasers designed to vaporize debris, outdated plasma cannons from the frontier wars. even a magnetic accelerator meant for launching research probes. All of it opened fire on the Swarm Scout ship. It was like throwing pebbles at a mountain. The lasers scorched the ship's organic hull without penetrating. The plasma dissipated against its shields. The research probe bounced off its armor and spiraled away into space. The Academy's entire arsenal was completely ineffective. But the Swarm Scout ship stopped advancing. Maya watched it hang in space, its smaller craft ceasing their attacks momentarily as if confused. The ship was analyzing this new behavior, trying to understand why its prey was fighting back when fighting back was clearly hopeless. "Why did they stop?" Keschel asked. "Because we're not acting like prey anymore," Maya said, understanding flooding through her. "The swarm has conquered dozens of species. They know how species react when facing extinction. They panic, they flee, they surrender. But we're shooting back with weapons that can't hurt them. From their perspective, we're either too stupid to know we're beaten, or we know something they don't." Zara caught on immediately. "They're worried it's a trap. That our apparent weakness is deception." "Exactly. We're human. My grandmother beat them with inferior forces because they couldn't understand why humans wouldn't accept the mathematics of defeat. They're looking for the trick, the hidden weapon, the strategy they're missing." Professor Velkesh smiled grimly. "So we keep shooting. We keep them confused and cautious." The Academy continued its futile barrage. The Swarm Scout ship retreated slightly, its smaller craft holding position but not attacking. They had bought time with nothing but psychology and bluff. Minutes crawled past. The shield generators continued their random pulsing, smoking, and sparking, but refusing to die. Students rushed between stations, managing fires and rerouting power. The hull showed dozens of scorch marks where attacks had gotten through. But the station held together. 25 minutes until the fleet arrived. Then Generator 2 exploded. The blast tore through the engineering section, killing 2 students instantly and injuring 5 more. Alarms screamed throughout the station as systems began cascading into failure. "We've lost 50% of shield capacity," someone reported through the chaos. "We can't maintain the pulse rotation. We need to make a choice. Protect critical systems or maintain minimal overall coverage." Maya looked at the display. At the Swarm Scout ship that was starting to advance again, its confusion fading as it realized the Academy truly had no hidden weapons. She looked at Professor Velkesh, at Zara, at all the students who had stepped up to face death rather than abandon those in need. "We protect the shelters," she said quietly, "where the colonists are. Everything else is secondary." It was a death sentence for everyone in the command center. If they concentrated shields on the deep shelters, they would leave themselves completely exposed. But 6,000 colonists would have a chance to survive until the fleet arrived. Professor Velkesh didn't hesitate. "Do it. All remaining power to the shelter sections." The shields collapsed around the command center. Maya felt the atmospheric integrity field fluctuate, the only thing between them and hard vacuum suddenly uncertain. Around her, students grabbed emergency oxygen masks, preparing for the hull breaches that would come. The Swarm Scout ship surged forward, its weapons charging for a final devastating strike. 20 more minutes. They just needed 20 more minutes. But they would be dead in seconds. Then space tore open and the fleet arrived early. The fleet didn't arrive through normal space. They came through quantum jump points, reality ripping open as a dozen warships materialized in perfect formation around the Academy. The lead ship was massive, its hull marked with the insignia of the 3rd Fleet Command, and Maya recognized it immediately from historical records. It was the Indomitable Will, the flagship that had led the final assault against the Void Swarm 30 years ago. The ship her grandmother had served on during the Proxima campaign. The Swarm Scout ship tried to flee. It barely made it 1,000 kilometers before the fleet's weapons reduced it to scattered molecules. The smaller swarm craft attempted to scatter, but coordinated fire from multiple ships eliminated them in seconds. The battle, if it could be called that, was over in less than a minute. Maya sagged in her chair, adrenaline draining away and leaving her shaking. Around her, students were crying, laughing, some doing both at once. Keschel was hugging his console. Crixenel had dropped his rifle and was making a keening sound that might have been his species' version of relieved laughter. Zara stood perfectly still, her crystalline features reflecting the light from the displays in patterns that suggested even Xenarians could be overwhelmed by emotion when pushed far enough. Professor Velkesh was speaking rapidly into communications, coordinating with the fleet, but his hands were shaking so badly he could barely operate the controls. He was ancient by Therian standards, and he had just lived through something that would have broken most people a fraction of his age. Indomitable will to Academy command. A voice crackled through the speakers. This is Fleet Admiral Koratavash. What is your status? Velkesh tried to respond, but his voice cracked. Maya reached over and activated her console's communication system. Academy command to Indomitable Will. This is Maya Chen, evacuation coordinator. We have sustained damage but are stable. 6,000 colonists from Theta 7 are safe in our deep shelters. Casualties among Academy personnel are minimal. We lost 2 students in engineering. There was a pause on the other end. When Admiral Tavash spoke again, her voice had changed, becoming something softer, but no less powerful. Did you say Maya Chen? As in Maya Sentinel Chen? Yes, Admiral, another pause. Your grandmother saved my life at Proxima. She kept the supply lines open when everyone said it was impossible. I would not be here without her sacrifice. It seems courage runs deep in your family. Maya didn't know what to say to that. Her grandmother had been a legend, and here was someone who had actually served with her, who owed her life to Sarah Chen's refusal to accept defeat. The weight of that legacy felt heavier than ever. We were just doing what needed to be done. Admiral, Maya finally managed. Just as your grandmother would have said. Admiral Tavash's voice carried approval. We're sending damage control teams and medical personnel. The Swarm Scout got a distress signal out before we destroyed it. More may come. We're establishing a defensive perimeter and evacuating all personnel to secure locations. You did well, all of you. You held against impossible odds with inadequate resources. That's the spirit that won the Swarm Wars. Over the next hours, the Academy was flooded with fleet personnel. Engineers assessed the damage and began emergency repairs. Medical teams treated the injured. The colonists from Theta 7 were transferred to fleet transports that would take them to safe worlds far from the frontier. Maya walked through the damaged corridors in a daze. She saw burn marks where swarm weapons had breached the hull, saw the engineering section where Generator 2 had exploded, saw the faces of students who had aged years in a single day. She found Crixnall in the cafeteria, his rifle disassembled on a table as he cleaned it meticulously, despite having never fired a shot. He looked up as she approached. Your grandmother fought these things for months, he said quietly. We barely survived an hour. We weren't equipped for combat, Maya pointed out, sitting across from him. She had a warship and trained soldiers. We had a school and scared students. Yet we survived. He clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. My people will tell songs of this day. The academy that held against the swarm with nothing but determination and clever tactics. Songs are nice, but I'd rather it never happened again. As would I. But I understand now why humans are respected. You turn disadvantage into strategy. You fight not because you can win, but because losing is unacceptable. That is a frightening philosophy to face in battle. Zara found them an hour later. Her crystalline features were dull with exhaustion, but she carried a data pad with purpose in her movements. She sat down without asking and pushed the pad across to Maya. I analyzed our defense, she said. The randomized shield pulsing, the psychological warfare of firing useless weapons, the decision to protect the colonists over ourselves. I've calculated the probability of success using conventional military doctrine. It was less than 3%. But we succeeded, Maya said. Yes, and I cannot mathematically explain why. The variables don't account for what humans call stubbornness, or what my people would call illogical persistence. You made decisions that a properly calculated analysis would reject, and yet they worked. She paused. I have spent my life believing in mathematics as the ultimate truth. But watching you today, I saw something that exists outside calculation, will perhaps, or faith. I don't have words for it in my language. We just did what we could with what we had, Maya said. No. You did what you believed should be done, regardless of capability. That is distinctly human. Zara's expression shifted into something that might have been a smile. It is also distinctly frustrating for those of us who prefer predictable outcomes. But I suppose that's why the Galactic Union needs humans. You make the impossible merely improbable. Professor Velkesh found them together and sat down heavily, his forearms folding in a gesture of profound weariness. I have been teaching for 70 years. I have educated 3 generations of scientists, diplomats, and leaders. I thought I understood the diverse species of our union, their strengths and limitations. He looked at Maya. Today I learned I understood nothing. I watched students solve problems that should have been unsolvable. I saw species that traditionally competed work together seamlessly, and I saw a young human woman with no command training coordinate a defense that saved thousands of lives. I wasn't alone, Maya protested. Everyone contributed. True, but you were the catalyst. When I was ready to surrender, when logic said survival was impossible, you said let's try anyway. That simple refusal to accept defeat changed everything. Your grandmother did the same at Proxima. Your father did it at the frontier station. It's not training or technology. It's something inherent to your species, this ridiculous optimism in the face of mathematical certainty. He stood slowly, his age showing in every movement. The Galactic Union was built on cooperation and logic. But we forgot that sometimes survival requires illogic, requires doing the unreasonable thing because it's right. Humans remember that. Thank you for reminding us. As he walked away, Maya felt the weight of his words. She had spent her life trying to escape her family's shadow, wanting to be seen for herself rather than her name. But today she had acted exactly as they would have. Not because she was trying to live up to a legacy, but because when faced with impossible choices, she had made the only ones her conscience allowed. Fleet personnel continued their work throughout the night. Temporary patches covered hull breaches. Replacement generators were brought in to restore full power. The Academy would survive, scarred but functional, a testament to what desperate people could accomplish. Admiral Tavash came to the command center personally as morning broke over the station. She was tall for a Therian, her purple skin marked with scars that told of a lifetime in service. She found Maya sitting at her console, staring at the evacuation logs, thinking about the two students who hadn't survived. Their names were Jeshka and Morvan, Tavash said quietly, reading the display over Maya's shoulder. Jeshka was studying to be an engineer like her father. Morvan wanted to teach xenobiology to children. They died keeping the generators running long enough for you to protect the colonists. They are heroes. They were students, Maya said, her voice hollow. They should have been studying for exams, not dying in a pointless war against an enemy that was supposed to be contained. War is never fair to those who fight it. Tavash sat down beside her. Your grandmother told me something once during the worst days of the Proxima campaign. She said that every person we saved made the sacrifice worthwhile. Not easier, not less painful, but worthwhile. 6,000 people are alive because of what happened here. Jeshka and Morvan are part of that. Their deaths mattered. Maya looked at the Admiral. Did you know my grandmother well? Well enough. She was my logistics coordinator during the campaign, most brilliant mind I ever worked with, and the most stubborn. When I told her our supply situation was impossible, she would just say, then I'll make it possible and get back to work. She never slept, never complained, just solved problem after problem until there were no problems left. Was she scared? Terrified. I found her crying in the supply bay once when she thought no one was watching. But the next morning she was back at her station, finding solutions to problems that should have had no solutions. Tavash paused. She would have been proud of you today. You have her gift for seeing possibilities where others see only limitations. The Admiral stood and placed something on the console, a small metal pin in the shape of a shield. This was your grandmother's. She left it to me when she knew she was dying, told me to give it to her granddaughter when she was ready. I think today proved you're ready. Maya picked up the pin. It was worn smooth from years of handling, warm from Tavash's hand. She could imagine her grandmother wearing this, touching it during the long nights at Proxima when death seemed certain and duty demanded she continue anyway. Thank you, Maya whispered. Thank you, Tavash replied, for reminding us all what the Sentinel name really means. Not invincibility, but the refusal to abandon those who need protection no matter the cost. As the Admiral left, Maya fastened the pin to her uniform. It felt right there. Not a burden, but a connection to something larger than herself. She understood now that legacy wasn't about living up to impossible standards. It was about choosing in critical moments to do what was right even when it was hard. Her grandmother had made that choice at Proxima. Her father had made it at the frontier station. And she had made it here at the Academy. The Sentinel name would follow her forever, but maybe that was okay. Maybe that was even good. 3 months after the defense of the Academy, Maya stood in the memorial garden that had been built to honor Jeshka and Morvan. 2 trees from their homeworlds grew side by side, their different biologies requiring separate environmental bubbles, yet positioned close enough to suggest unity even in death. Plaques beneath each tree told their stories, ensuring future students would know the price of their survival. The academy had reopened 2 weeks ago after extensive repairs. Students had returned to find their school transformed. Temporary patches still marked hull sections awaiting permanent repair. New shield generators hummed with increased capacity, designed to never fail as the old ones had. But the biggest changes weren't structural. They were in the students themselves. Species that had previously kept to their own groups now mixed freely. Drexians studied alongside Luminari. Xenarians shared notes with humans. The terror they had faced together had dissolved barriers that centuries of peaceful coexistence had never quite erased. Survival had a way of making differences seem trivial. Maya's life had changed too, though not always in comfortable ways. She was famous now, not just for her name but for her actions. News services across the Galactic Union had run stories about the Academy's defense, with Maya's face featured prominently. The quiet student who had wanted to avoid attention was now recognized everywhere she went, but there were unexpected benefits. When she walked into advanced xenobiology, she no longer sat in the back. She sat in the middle, surrounded by friends who saw her as Maya first and as a sentinel second. Zara sat on one side, constantly challenging her conclusions and making her think harder about every problem. Crixnell sat on the other, his warrior's discipline bringing unexpected focus to their study groups. Professor Velkesh entered the classroom, moving with more energy than he had before the defense. The experience had changed him too. He was less stern, more willing to acknowledge that book learning wasn't the only kind of education that mattered. Today we begin our unit on crisis adaptation in biological systems, he announced. How species evolve in response to existential threats and what we can learn from their survival strategies. He pulled up a holographic display showing various organisms from across the galaxy. But first I want to discuss a different kind of adaptation. The social and psychological changes that occur when disparate groups must cooperate or die. His eyes found Maya. Miss Chen, you coordinated the evacuation during our recent crisis. What would you say was the most important factor in our success? Maya had learned that running from these moments didn't work. Better to face them head on. Trust, Professor. We had to trust that everyone would do their part, even when we couldn't oversee everything directly. And they did. Elaborate, Velkesh prompted. The evacuation only worked because hundreds of people made good decisions independently. Medical teams organized triage without constant orders. Engineering students fixed problems I didn't even know existed. The cafeteria staff kept everyone fed through the entire crisis. I coordinated, but I couldn't have managed every detail. Trust in each other's competence made it possible. A Melodian student raised a crystalline appendage. But isn't trust risky? What if someone had failed at a critical moment? Then we would have adapted, Maya replied. That's the other thing I learned. Perfect planning is impossible. Something always goes wrong. Success isn't about having a flawless plan. It's about having people who can think creatively when the plan fails. Zara added, the randomized shield configuration is an example. It violated every principle of efficient system design. By traditional analysis, it should have failed immediately. But it worked because we were willing to try something with no precedent, betting that unpredictability itself could be a defense. Professor Velkesh nodded approvingly. This is what I want you to understand. Biological adaptation and social adaptation follow similar principles. Both require flexibility, tolerance for uncertainty, and willingness to try solutions that haven't been proven. Species that rigidly cling to established patterns often go extinct when environments change rapidly. The lecture continued, but Maya found herself thinking about her family. Her grandmother hadn't won at Proxima through superior tactics or technology. She had won by refusing to accept that proven methods were the only methods. When the supply lines were mathematically impossible to maintain, she had maintained them anyway through sheer creative stubbornness. That was the real human advantage. Not that they were smarter or stronger, but that they looked at impossible problems and said, what if we try anyway? Other species calculated odds and made rational decisions. Humans calculated odds, disagreed with mathematics, and succeeded through methods that shouldn't have worked but somehow did. After class, Maya found a message waiting on her console. It was from Admiral Tivash, marked Priority Personal. Miss Chen, I hope this message finds you well. I'm contacting you about an opportunity. The fleet is establishing a new training program focused on unconventional problem solving and crisis response. We call it the Sentinel Initiative. Named in honor of your grandmother and the principles she embodied, we're looking for instructors who understand that sometimes the best solution is the one that shouldn't work. Would you be interested in contributing to the curriculum development? Your practical experience would be invaluable. Think about it. No pressure, but I believe you could help train the next generation of officers to think beyond conventional limitations. Maya stared at the message, an opportunity to shape how the fleet trained its people, to ensure that rigid doctrine didn't override creative thinking when lives were at stake. It was tempting, but it would mean more attention, more responsibility, more weight on the Sentinel name. She was still thinking about it when Crixnall found her in the library that evening. The Drexian had become a close friend, his warrior philosophy meshing surprisingly well with her practical approach to problems. He sat down across from her without speaking, waiting until she was ready to talk. I got offered a position helping develop fleet training programs, Maya finally said. That is a great honor. It's also terrifying. What if I mess it up? What if my ideas don't work in actual military situations? Crixnall clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. You are thinking like a warrior who has never tasted battle. But you have fought, Maya. You led us through impossible circumstances and we survived. You have earned your place among those who make decisions. I just did what seemed right at the time. Exactly. You did not hesitate when action was needed. You did not wait for perfect information or guaranteed success. You saw a problem and addressed it. That is what leadership is, not the absence of fear or doubt, but the willingness to act despite them. He leaned forward, his exoskeleton catching the light. My people have a legend about the first warrior, who faced a beast that could not be killed by any weapon. She studied the beast, learned its patterns, and realized its only weakness was that it always did what logic dictated. So she did the illogical thing. She walked toward it unarmed, and when it moved to devour her as expected, she dodged in a direction that made no tactical sense. The beast, having committed to the logical attack, could not adjust. She survived by being unpredictable. And the point is? Maya asked. The point is that sometimes wisdom is knowing when to ignore wisdom. You are being asked to teach others how to think beyond doctrine, how to see possibilities that analysis says don't exist. Who better than someone who has actually done it? Maya smiled. When did you become so philosophical? When I watched a human save 6,000 lives with broken shields and desperate improvisation. You changed my understanding of strength. Before I thought it was about being the hardest, the fastest, the most skilled. Now I know it's about being the most persistent, the most adaptable, the most willing to try one more time when trying seems futile. Later that night, Maya composed her response to Admiral Tavash. She accepted the position, not because she felt qualified, but because she understood that qualification was sometimes less important than willingness. Her grandmother had coordinated supply lines with no logistics training. Her father had led evacuations with no command experience. They had succeeded because they refused to let inexperience become an excuse for inaction. The Sentinel name meant different things to different people. To some, it meant invincible warriors who never failed. But Maya understood the truth now. It meant ordinary people who faced extraordinary circumstances and refused to quit. It meant being scared and doing the right thing anyway. It meant improvising solutions when proper answers didn't exist. The next morning, Maya returned to the memorial garden before dawn. She wanted a quiet moment with Jeshka and Morvan before the day began. She touched each plaque gently, reading their names, remembering their faces during those frantic hours when they had all fought to survive. I'm going to help train fleet officers, she told them quietly. I'm going to make sure people learn that sacrifice matters, that every life saved is worth fighting for. I'll make sure your deaths meant something beyond just that one day. The sun rose over the academy, its light filtering through the environmental bubbles that protected the memorial trees. Maya watched the shadows shift and thought about how far she had come from that first day, when Professor Velkesh had read her name and everything changed. She had wanted to be ordinary, to escape her family's legacy, but she understood now that legacy wasn't a burden to escape. It was a foundation to build upon. Her grandmother had held the line at Proxima. Her father had stayed behind at the frontier station, and she had coordinated a desperate defense with broken equipment and untrained students. Each generation of Sentinels had faced their moment of impossible choice. Each had chosen duty over safety, others over self. That pattern wasn't destiny forcing her into a predetermined role. It was simply who the Chen family chose to be when moments of crisis arrived. Footsteps approached from behind. Maya turned to find Professor Velkesh walking toward her, moving slowly through the morning mist. "I thought I might find you here," he said, stopping beside her. "Saying goodbye before you leave?" "I'm not leaving," Maya said, confused. "I'm still enrolled, for now. But the Sentinel Initiative will demand significant time. Within a year, you'll be traveling to fleet academies, consulting on crisis protocols, possibly even serving on active ships during training exercises. Your education here will continue, but it will be different." Maya hadn't thought that far ahead. She had only focused on accepting the position, not on what it would mean for her studies, her friendships, her carefully constructed routine. "I don't want to leave," she admitted. "I've finally found where I belong." Velkesh gestured to the memorial trees. "You belong wherever you're needed. That's the blessing and curse of competence. The galaxy now knows what you can do, and it will ask you to do it again and again. You can refuse, of course. No one would blame you for wanting a normal life after what you've experienced. But," Maya prompted, hearing the unspoken word, "but I think you'd regret it. Not immediately, perhaps, but years from now, when you hear about a crisis where your insight might have made a difference, where people died because those in charge couldn't think beyond doctrine, you'd wonder if you should have helped when you had the chance." He was right, and Maya knew it. The weight of the Sentinel name wasn't just about past accomplishments. It was about future responsibility. She had the knowledge and experience to help others survive impossible situations. Refusing to share that knowledge was its own kind of failure. "My grandmother never got to retire, did she?" Maya asked. "No, she died at 68, still coordinating relief efforts for colonies affected by resource shortages. Your father died at 43 during an evacuation. The Sentinel name carries a price, Maya, but it also carries purpose. Not everyone finds purpose in their life. You've been given one, inherited from those who came before and proven through your own actions." They stood in silence, watching the alien trees sway in the artificial breeze. Finally, Maya spoke. "I'll do it. The training program, the consulting, whatever helps people survive. But I'm not giving up my studies here. If I'm going to teach others, I need to keep learning myself." "I would expect nothing less," Velkesh said with satisfaction. "The best teachers are perpetual students. They understand that knowledge is a journey, not a destination." Over the following months, Maya's life became a balance between academy studies and fleet responsibilities. She spent weeks developing curriculum for the Sentinel Initiative, writing training scenarios based on the Academy defense and historical Chen family operations. She traveled to fleet installations, consulting with officers who had spent decades following established doctrine and now needed to learn when to ignore it. The work was exhausting, but fulfilling. She met admirals and strategists, engineers and medical officers, all struggling with the same fundamental problem: how to prepare for crises that couldn't be anticipated. Her answer was always the same: stop trying to prepare for specific scenarios and instead cultivate adaptability, creativity, and willingness to attempt solutions that analysis deemed improbable. Some officers embraced her teachings. Others resisted, clinging to the comfort of proven methods. Maya learned that changing institutional thinking was harder than facing the void swarm. At least the swarm was honestly trying to kill you. Bureaucracy killed through inertia and resistance to change. But slowly, the Sentinel Initiative gained acceptance. Training exercises began incorporating impossible scenarios, where conventional solutions were deliberately ineffective. Officers learned to value improvisation alongside planning, intuition alongside analysis. The fleet was beginning to understand what Maya's grandmother had known: that sometimes survival required abandoning the rule book and trusting human creativity to find a way. A year after the Academy defense, Maya received word that the void swarm had been detected again, this time emerging from dark space near the outer colonies. The fleet mobilized immediately, and Admiral Tavash requested Maya's presence aboard the Indomitable Will as a civilian consultant. Maya stood before her packed bag, staring at it like it might bite. This was different from training exercises or curriculum development. This was actual combat, facing the nightmare that had killed her father and nearly destroyed the Academy. Every instinct screamed at her to refuse, to stay safe, to let trained military personnel handle it. But she thought about the colonists who would be in danger, about fleet officers who might face situations requiring unconventional thinking, about her grandmother standing on this same ship's deck 3 decades ago, scared but resolute. She picked up the bag. Zara found her at the departure terminal. The Zenarian had continued her studies, her analytical brilliance earning top marks in every class. But she had changed too, incorporating intuition into her calculations, accepting that some solutions existed outside pure mathematics. "You're really going," Zara said, not quite a question. "I have to. They specifically requested me. Because you're a sentinel, because I've actually faced the swarm and survived. I know what it's like, and that experience might help others survive too." Zara was quiet for a moment, her crystalline features reflecting complex patterns. "I calculated the probability of your survival if the fleet engages the swarm in extended combat. I won't tell you the number because you'll go anyway, and knowing would serve no purpose except to increase your fear." Maya smiled sadly. "That bad?" "Worse than the academy. But you survived that when mathematics said you wouldn't. Perhaps you exist outside probability calculations. Perhaps humans all do." Zara stepped forward and did something Maya had never seen a Zenarian do. She embraced her, crystalline arms wrapping around Maya's shoulders. "Come back. We still have experiments to complete, and you're the only partner who tolerates my perfectionism." "I'll come back," Maya promised, hoping it was true. Crixnell was waiting at the shuttle, his rifle across his back, a travel pack at his feet. Maya stopped short. "What are you doing?" "Going with you, obviously." "Crix, this isn't your fight. You're a student, not a soldier. Neither are you, yet you go. Besides, my people honor warriors who stand with their battle companions. You saved my life at the academy by coordinating our defense. Honor demands I protect yours when called." His mandibles clicked firmly. "Do not argue. It wastes time we do not have." Maya wanted to argue, wanted to order him to stay, but she knew Drexian honor codes were inflexible. Refusing him would be an insult worse than letting him walk into danger. "Fine, but you follow my orders, understood?" "I follow the Sentinel's commands. This I swear by my ancestors' names." The shuttle ride to the Indomitable Will was quiet. Maya watched the academy grow smaller in the viewport, wondering if she'd see it again. The station bore scars from the swarm attack, but it had survived. Like her, it carried the marks of battle but continued functioning, continued serving its purpose. Admiral Tavash met them in the docking bay personally. She looked older than Maya remembered, the weight of command aging her rapidly, but her eyes were sharp, focused, carrying the same determination that had defined Sarah Chen. "Maya Sentinel Chen," she said formally. "Welcome aboard the Indomitable Will. Your grandmother served on this ship with distinction. I hope you'll honor her memory during what's to come." "I'll do my best, Admiral. That's all anyone can ask." Tavash noticed Crixnell. "And you brought a Drexian warrior. Good. We'll need all perspectives for what we're facing. The swarm emergence is larger than any we've seen since the wars ended. They're probing our defenses, testing for weaknesses. We think they're preparing for a major offensive." She led them through the ship's corridors, past crew members who stopped to stare at Maya. The Sentinel, who had held the academy with student defenders, was already legendary throughout the fleet. Maya felt the weight of their expectations and tried to ignore it. In the strategy room, holographic displays showed the swarm's positions. Dozens of scout ships with more emerging every hour. Behind them, sensor data suggested massive carrier vessels, each capable of deploying thousands of smaller attack craft. "We're outnumbered 10-1, a Therian officer explained. "Conventional engagement will result in catastrophic losses. We need something unexpected, something the swarm won't anticipate." All eyes turned to Maya. They wanted a miracle, a brilliant strategy that would turn impossible odds into victory. But she wasn't a military genius. She was just someone who had learned that sometimes the answer wasn't about being clever. It was about being willing to try things others wouldn't. "Tell me everything about how we fought the swarm before," Maya said. "Every tactic, every strategy, every pattern they've learned to expect from us. Because whatever we've done before, we need to do the opposite now." The briefing lasted hours. Maya listened to accounts of battles, studied swarm behavior patterns, examined the mathematics of engagement that all pointed toward defeat. But beneath the data, she saw something. The swarm learned, adapted, but they learned based on logic. They anticipated rational responses to threats. "We need to do something irrational," she finally said. "Something so unexpected that their pattern recognition fails." "Such as?" Admiral Tavash prompted. Maya looked at the display showing the swarm formation. They were advancing in a standard assault pattern, expecting the fleet to establish defensive positions and attempt to hold territory. That was how every previous battle had gone. Defense, attrition, hope for reinforcements. "We charge," Maya said simply. "Full speed directly at their largest concentration of forces." The room erupted in protests. It was suicide. It violated every principle of space combat. It was exactly what the swarm would want them to do. Maya waited for the objections to quiet, which is why they won't expect it. They'll assume it's a feint, that we're trying to bait them. They'll hold position waiting for our real attack. But we don't have a real attack. The charge is the attack. We hit them hard and fast before they can adjust to the fact that we're genuinely doing something insane. Admiral Tavash studied the display, 4 hands moving across controls as she ran simulations. The mathematics were terrible. But they were marginally less terrible than conventional defense. And Maya was right, the swarm wouldn't expect it. Their behavior pattern models all assumed rational enemy action. This wasn't rational. "If we do this," Tavash said slowly, "many ships will be lost. Many people will die. Are you certain this is our best option?" Maya thought about her grandmother, coordinating supplies during the Proxima campaign, about her father, staying behind at the frontier station, about Jeshka and Morvan, dying to keep generators running, about 6,000 colonists who were alive because people had done desperate, probably doomed things. "No," she admitted. "I'm not certain. But I know that if we fight the way the swarm expects, we definitely lose. If we fight in a way they can't predict, we might survive. That's the best I can offer." Admiral Tavash looked around the room at her officers. The Sentinel Initiative was founded on the principle that conventional thinking leads to conventional results. Maya Chen held the academy by refusing to accept defeat when defeat was certain. "I say we trust her judgment now. All in favor of the charge?" One by one, hands and appendages raised. Not all of them, not even most, but enough. A consensus built from desperation and the faint hope that maybe, just maybe, doing the unexpected might work one more time. "Then we charge," Admiral Tavash declared. "All ships prepare for full-speed assault on Swarm Position Alpha." This is not a drill. This is humanity showing the galaxy why we're called Sentinels. Because we protect what matters no matter the cost. Maya felt the ship rumble as engines powered up to full capacity. Around her, officers moved with practiced efficiency, but she could see the fear in their eyes. They were about to charge directly into overwhelming enemy forces with nothing but hope and the legacy of a family that specialized in impossible victories. She touched the pin on her uniform, her grandmother's sentinel shield worn smooth by decades of touch. Sarah Chen had stood on this ship's deck and faced the swarm with inadequate resources. Now Maya stood in the same place, making the same choice. To fight rather than flee, to try rather than surrender. The fleet began its charge, and the void swarm waited ahead like darkness given form. Maya Chen, ordinary student who had wanted nothing but anonymity, stood at the heart of humanity's desperate gambit and prayed that one more time, being unreasonably stubborn would be enough.